Hey everyone, in our last few videos, what we have done is we have learned about NetMiko and Paramiko module, like how exactly we automate things like getting the configuration from Cisco router, pushing the configuration to Cisco router, or getting the running configuration and storing it on a backup server, or maybe scheduling the backups as per your requirement whenever you want to do backups, right? So this is what we have explored so far. Now this is something like that was a very simple task that we have done. Now in this video we are going to use Ansible. So before I talk about Ansible, let me talk about a video that I created, or a script that I created long back. So I created a script that is related to the firmware upgrade, or I would say iOS upgrade on Cisco router. So the script was divided into many parts. So for example, first you will log into the Cisco router and get the configuration, current configuration from the Cisco router manually using the current version, current inventory information, whatever, and put it in a CSV file. Then what you do is we copy the iOS onto the router's flash using the automation. And what the automation script does is it does verify the checksum after the file is copied. After it completes the checksum validation, then what the script does is it basically, go to the configuration mode and change the boot sequence of your router's current configuration to the new configuration. And after it is done changing the boot sequence, it reboots the router. Then the script waits for approx 2 or 3 minutes, and then it logs into the router and verify if the router is upgraded or not. And then finally it will show you the output of whether what was the earlier version and what is the current version. So this particular task is something that I did was without Ansible. So this place, what I have done is I use pause, or I would say time pause when the script was used to run. For example, when the file is getting copied from a network device into the iOS, right? So I'll put a pause of, like, let's say 5 minutes. And after the file is getting copied, I don't know whether the file is getting copied or not, but I wait for 5 minutes. And then after that I do check whether the file is copied or not. So I have another syntax there. So all these things were manual and with one script. So now imagine if something breaks, so the entire flow breaks, right? So now with coming to Ansible, why did I speak about this particular task that I created is because in Ansible, things are very simple. So Ansible can, transform your network management right from the comfort of your own setup. Imagine like you are in charge of a company network infrastructure. Now you have many network switches, routers, firewalls spread across different locations. So now let's say you receive a notification about a security patch that needs to be applied urgently on all the network devices. Now if you have to do it manual security patch, trust me, if you have huge number of devices, it gonna take lot of time in order to apply the patch, and it'll also leave a room for errors as well. So that's where the Ansible, come into the picture. Basically, Ansible can do that very quickly without any security error. So with Ansible, you can patch your firewalls, and it can automate the entire process, ensuring a quick and error-free update across all the devices. So what we have to do is we have to start writing a playbook. So playbook is something like, think it of a recipe that tells Ansible what exactly needs to be done. Will specify the firmware version and the steps needed to apply the patch on the playbook. So once the playbook is ready, it will then execute, and Ansible will take care of the rest. It will connect to each device, check its current version, firmware version, and if needed, apply the patch automatically. No more manual, updates or risking missing devices. Now let's tackle the firewall rules. With Ansible, this becomes very easy. So let's say we need to allow access to a new server. So what I'll update our playbook to include the new rules, specify the source and destination, and the ports that are needed in order to, for the firewall rules to work. And then with the simple command, Ansible will push the changes to all the firewall, ensuring the security policies are changed across. So amplifies, Ansible simplifies everything. So it can also help you to do the network monitoring. So, and also it will help you to do the zero touch provisioning as well for the sites that has newly set up on the network. So I would say with coming to the Ansible, Ansible is basically an orchestration where you set the repetitive task that you do on daily basis, and that task will be performed by Ansible, making your job easier, making your life easier, and it'll be error free. So we'll discuss more about Ansible when we are doing the real time scenarios. Now, what how exactly you install Ansible? So Ansible can be installed on a uh, Ubuntu box or a CentOS or a Red Hat system, or there are certain other flavors that where you can install Ansible. In our video, what we are going to do is we are going to install Ansible on the Ubuntu server. So I've already installed the Ansible on the Ubuntu box. If you are interested and want to learn how exactly we install Ansible server, do reach me out so that I can create another video on how to install Ubuntu and then install Ansible on that box. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a demo how exactly the configuration looks like. Before that, I'll talk about like what exactly kind of files you need for Ansible to work. You basically need a host.inf file on your Ansible, which will go and create. Host is basically a set of inventory where you have like what host you wanted to connect to. And the YAML file is basically the steps that you define, what are the things that you want to do when you are doing the automation. For example, go to the configuration mode, change the Ethernet IP address, blah, 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 and exit out of the configuration, something like that, right? So you define the steps that you wanted to perform. So let's do one thing. Let me, show up my Ubuntu box, and I'll show you how exactly we play around with Ansible. Before that, this is what my setup looks like. So Ansible is installed on a Ubuntu box, and there is a router 1 and router 2. In this router 1 and 2, we will connect via SSH. And then what we are going to do is we are going to send the commands remotely to these routers using Ansible. Okay. Let me SSH to the Ubuntu box. Okay, I logged into the Ubuntu box. So this is the box it looks like. Let me change the font. Appearance, change. Let me make it 16 so that you guys can see. So this is how the box looks like. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a directory here, Ansible demo. So I'll make a directory called Ansible demo. So I'm creating a new folder. I'm going to the folder Ansible demo, and the first and the foremost, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a basically a host file that is required for the Ansible when you define the inventory basically for the Ansible host, what you want to access. So I'll quickly share the screen. So this is the sample which I've already created for you. So you can, you can take a look, right? I'm going to explain what exactly this is. So the first here, what you see here is this is basically, you can think it of a header. This header particularly defines what are the kind of a host that you have in your under this umbrella. So this is a kind of an umbrella. Under this, whatever the host you are going to define, so this particular header or umbrella is going to, carry all the host underneath whatever you define here. So think it of a group. So for example, this is just a tagging. So under this tag, whatever the host name you define, so you're going to use this tag for in your YAML file. So which will explain later again, right? Then what is the first thing? First thing is basically the name of the host that you define in the inventory. So this name can be anything. It doesn't has to match with the actual host name of your router, but basically this is just a name, a reference that whenever you execute the command, so this name you see while executing the command. So this is not necessarily be to the uh, host name of the router. Then what you define it is Ansible host. So in the Ansible host, what exactly you define here is the IP address or the host name of your device. So in our case, we are going to use Cisco router. So we have defined the IP address of your Cisco router under this Ansible host. Now, next is what you are defining is Ansible underscore user. So this Ansible underscore user is basically it specifies the username when connecting to the Cisco router using the credential as Cisco, right? So you're pushing the configuration Cisco as the username. Then comes to your Ansible password. So this is the password when you SSH to the router. As soon as you enter a username, it asks you for the password. So this is the password that it's gonna use. Then the next thing, Ansible become yes. So what exactly it is? It indicates whether a privilege escalation or becoming a super user is required for running the commands on the Cisco router. If it is set to yes, that means you're indicating that a privilege escalation is required. Now, next is your Ansible become method enable, right? So it specifies the method that you are using for the privilege escalation. In this case, we are setting to enable. So which means like as soon as you go to the enter the username and the password, you have to go to the enable mode. You have to type enable, right? When you type in the credential. So this is what we are exactly setting. So we are setting the enable here. So which means after the username and password is done. So on the, in order to go to the privilege mode, so we are enabling this command by setting this flag to enable. Then we are setting the enable password here. Ansible become password Cisco. So this is the enable password that we are sending while after enabling the command. And last is your Ansible Network OS. So this is what you are defining is the Cisco routers iOS. So in our case, we are upgrading the Cisco, or sorry, logging into the Cisco router. So we are defining the OS as iOS. So in some cases, you will have different OS, which will have take a look at the later end. But this is how exactly your router look like. So at in the future, I mean, once we test this out, we'll also add another host and see how exactly that works, right? So this is something I have already tested it some time back, and I wanted to show you a demo for this particular host. We'll add another host as per our, uh, image here or topology here. Now here, so this, let's create first a host file. So this particular file, what we have to do is we have to create a host file. So I'll enter the command vi hosts.ini. So this is the host file that we are going to create. So I'll put a set this configuration and save the configuration here. So if I have to show you, so you will see if I do a cat, so it will give you what configuration we have set for this particular host file. Right now, what we have to do is we have to create the YAML file. So what exactly things are in the YAML file? So YAML file begins with these three hyphens. So this is the format of the YAML file, and you see they are under a particular structure. So you have to make sure like whatever YAML file you are creating, they are properly following the structure so that you define the task and under the commands underneath the task. So we'll talk about it. So first and the foremost, here comes a name. So name is basically, it defines what is the playbook name for your this particular task that you're performing, right? And so this is the playbook name that you have defined here. Under this playbook, you have subsequent subset of commands. For example, we are logging into the routers. We have OSPF configuration, and in the OSPF, we are sending this command. So basically, you are setting this as a playbook name. So just a name on the top, a kind of a header you can think of. Now, next, host. In this host, what we have defined Cisco routers. So remember this, the host file that we created. On top of the host file, we use the same header. So basically, you are saying this particular this is the group of host, or this is the target host that we have to use when we execute the task. So when you run this command, so this particular Cisco underscore router will basically look for this host file in the host.ini, right? And then use these particular devices as part of your inventory. Then next is your connection. Connection, we have defined it as a network CLI. So now this specifies like what exactly plugin you are using to connect to the Cisco routers using Ansible. So basically we have defined it as network underscore CLI is the module, or is the method that we are using in order to connect to the Cisco routers. Then comes your task. So task as task, you can have multiple tasks, you can have one task. So for example, you see here task is this, right? So you can have more tasks as well. So when you have more tasks here, let's say if you create another task, for example, like this, so that means you're defining another task. So that task will be only be completed once this task is finished, right? So it's an order list of your task, kind of, right? So this will be, this task basically defines what exactly you are going to complete when you are running this YAML file. So in this task, what we have defined, we have defined a name called as a configure task. So in this name is configure OSPF task is what we have defined here. And under the name itself, we have defined iOS config. So iOS config is the Ansible module that you use to send the configuration to the Cisco iOS devices. So this is pretty much required. All this whatever you see are, those are pretty much required. So you are sending the commands to the iOS. So that is the reason you put as iOS underscore config here. Now comes the line. So this lines is under the Cisco iOS config. In these lines, you specify the list of the configuration that has to be applied to the devices. So for example, we are configuring the OSPF, right? So what we are defining here is under this lines, we are sending certain commands to the router. So these commands are under this line. So which means, so if you see here, the main head of this particular configuration is name. Under this name, you see there are several things like host connection, and under host connection, you have task. Under task, you have name. Under name, you have iOS config. Under iOS config, you have lines. Right now, when you send this configuration, so basically all these commands will be sent for this particular host of router, and this particular host of routers is defined in your host.ini file. Now let's what we do is we'll copy this particular YAML file and put it in the serve. We'll make it as pi ansible demo.yml. Okay, and now we'll paste this configuration. So make sure all the formatting is correct and save the configuration. Before I show you something, let me log into the router and if in case the configuration is already there, I'll remove the configuration. So I'm logging into the router. Just 1 second, I'm getting a call. Okay, 200 Cisco. Let's see, show run. So if you see, the OSPF configuration is already there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the configuration from here. Now let's see. Now if you see, there is no OSPF configuration at this time. So now let's do one thing. Let's execute this command and see what exactly happens when you run this particular command. So we'll type Ansible playbook and define the host file, host.ini, and then we define the YAML file, Ansible demo.yml. Right now we'll execute the command. Okay, so it is trying to execute. Now if you see, what it did was, right, it went to the, it tried to went to the router. So router states looks okay for it, and then it tried to configure the task that we have defined on the router, like whatever configuration you define on your ini file, on this particular YAML file, right? It send those command to the router, and after sending this command, this says like a okay to and change one. So that means it changed the configuration successfully. Now let's see the actual router. What happens to the actual router? Now what I'll do is I'll run this command show run and see. Okay, so if you notice here, the command was sent successfully. So it means like this particular task was executed successfully. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another host and see what happens if I add another host. Will it work seamlessly, or is there any kind of an issue? 201 Cisco, Cisco, Cisco at 123, I guess. Yes, Cisco at 123. So let's run the same command and see if there is any OSPF related configuration. No, there is no OSPF related configuration. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the host file. So let's go here, edit the host file. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. Okay, add another router. Let's rename that router as router 2. Okay, so we'll change the name as router 2, and then I'll change the IP address as 201, username, password, and I'll set the enable password at Cisco123, and rest of the parameters are same. Save the configuration. Now let's run the command again and see what happens to the second router. Now let me remove the configuration from the 200 as well again. So now this router plus second router, both the router does not have this configuration. Let's run this command. Okay, so if you notice, in case of router 1, it changed the configuration, but in case of router 2, the configuration was not changed. It says failed. Now we have to understand why exactly it failed the connection. So if you see here, there are some errors that you see. Fatal error, and it gives you some information like so and so. Now here is the actual error. The authenticity of host 201 cannot be established. The SSH RSA key print is so and so field to execute, right? So what does this mean? So this means like I am I am able to access 201, but however the SSH key was not accepted. So we have to accept the SSH key fingerprint in order to access that router. So there are two ways to do it. Either you manually SSH the router from this particular host and accept the fingerprint. That's one thing. Otherwise, on your configuration of your Ansible configuration, you can disable the verification of your SSH key. How do I do that? Let's see via etc. Let me see. Okay, I lost the access while checking something. So let me check again. etc. So if Ansible file is not created, so what I'm going to do is mkdir etc Ansible cd, or I would say vi etc Ansible ansible.config. So this is the file which I'm going to create. Now under this file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create as defaults like this. Okay, now under this default, host underscore key underscore checking equal to false, and save this configuration. Now let's try to run the playbook and see what happens now. Okay, so sorry, I'm not in the right folder. cd Ansible demo, and now run this. Okay, so if you see here, for the router 2 and 1, it says okay for both. But what happened? In router 1, if you notice, the configuration was failed. And the reason why configuration was failed is because if you remember the last time when we executed, the command were already present. So that is the reason it says the configuration is failed. If you look at the router 2, it says the configuration was changed. So let's see in both the routers. So first router, you see the configuration is already present. And in the second router, the configuration was added just now. So which means like we were able to, do this configuration by sending the command. Now, if you want to, handle this error, like if you want to see like how do you want to, if such exception, if you want to handle it, so you have to better, play with the YAML file in order to handle the exceptions properly. Otherwise, you will see these exceptions on your system whenever you are executing such commands. So you have to make sure like you do the checks before executing the command. For example, first check whether the configuration is present or not. If the configuration is present, probably, then you don't enter the configuration. If in case the configuration is not present, then you enter the configuration. So such things is something like we have to explore how exactly we can do this. But this is how exactly the Ansible looks like. To show you fresh again, so I'll remove the configuration once more and show you the latest one. No router OSPF 1. Now if you see, the configuration is not present on both the routers. If I now execute it, it will not give me any error. Okay, so it says okay for both the configuration, and what I see here is change one, change one. So that means the configuration was applied properly. So this is how exactly you can play around with the YAML file in the host file. So we can send whatever the configuration that we wish based on the orchestration way. So for example, first few set of command has to run, and after that commands are run, then only you execute another set of commands, right? So we'll explore more how exactly and what all things we can do using Ansible. But I hope this video is informative for you. Thank you for watching.